If you want one of those frameable memories of Kenya's astounding natural beauty, visit the Aberdare Ranges. They'll knock you out. But like many other things in Kenya, its beauty and the usefulness of the rivers that spring from here shouldn't be taken at face value.
The Aberdares have quenched our thirst as a country for millennia. It's what ties all Kenyans together if you think about it. This water pillar feeds the cities. It feeds our countrysides and it feeds the pastoral communities downstream from here. But this wonderful looking waterfall and the many that's around it here in the Aberdare Ranges is hiding something from you. The waters that flow down from the Aberdares aren't reaching where they used to. And that means that a disaster is on the horizon for the pastoral communities that depend on the river that flows from the Aberdares, the Iwasonyiro.
My name is John Allen Namu. I'm a Kenyan investigative reporter, and I'm on a journey. I'm following these streams down from where they start, high above most of Kenya, down to where they join to form one of northern Kenya's most iconic rivers, the Iwasonyiro. But the story I'm looking for is about the people who depend on it. From when the river is full to the beginning of the worst drought in 10 years. I want to understand the story behind the drying up river and the conflict that comes when the river ends.
I will fight with a panga, with a spear, with my own teeth. No day I will live here. And I have told my sons, who are 7, none should leave this place. They should better perish because I got them from this soil and I will have to fertilize this soil again.
Mount Kenya is here and the Aberdares is here. Mount Kenya and the Aberdares Ranges. Where we have got these water towers, okay, is where already the cloud system are based, okay? And remember, these are the regions which are feeding the whole of this region, and even they feed Lake Victoria. And some of this water also feeds to the Indian Ocean, okay? So in the absence or in the presence of the climate change, and things now change here, they will certainly change the lifestyle of virtually everybody in this area.
Between the months of October 2016 and April 2017, all forecasts have shown that Kenya will be in the middle of one of the worst droughts in almost 10 years. But because it's hot now, many of us Kenyans will have forgotten that just a year earlier, this was one of the wettest periods in almost a decade. We were in the middle of El Nino, a weather phenomenon characterized by very high amounts of rainfall.
In particular, if you look at the El Nino phenomenon, we know that we had an El Nino phenomenon in 2015, and that was as strong as the one we had in 97 and 98. These are two very strong El Ninos. So what we're now seeing, we're seeing the tail of that. We had a failure in the short rains last year, and it is very likely, I think the forecast is that the long rains will also be affected. It is part of the phenomenon.
For a long time now in Kenya, we've seen reports of the effects of drought in some of the driest parts of our country, which is over 70% of Kenya's landmass.
Rainfall levels in December were too low to reverse the dry spell in counties.
A devastating drought is swirling through the northern, southern and eastern parts of the country.
What is being described as the worst drought to hit the country since 2011.
In September 2009, during the last La Nina period, I reported on one effect of drought: violence. A serious inter-clan conflict over pasture in what is now Isiolo County, Kenya's geographical center and a gateway to the north. It always bothered me that beyond going to the battleground then, I never really heard the stories of those fighting. I've come back exactly 8 years later. This time around, to hear the stories of the people who over the course of the drought's unfolding will be the hardest hit by extreme weather. I start at Archer's Post, a trading post where most of Isiolo's communities like the Borana, the Turkana and the Samburu meet. It's a livestock market day. People come from far away. It's a good time to make a sale. Grass and water are still available, so most of the animals here are healthy and will fetch a good price. But this is the tail end of the good times. Already, water levels in the Owasongiro River are looking quite low. I want to hear what local herders are thinking about the times ahead. I'm introduced to Lautiriman Letwo. We meet at the noisy mouth of the Owasongiro. He agrees to take us into Samburu County, where a group of his friends are herding their family's livestock. And the further into our trip we get, the drier and harsher the landscape begins to look, and the search for water is on. This village on our way to Lautiriman's friends is a perfect example of what happens when grass around the homestead is no longer available.
Hapo. Hapo, hapo.
Nalparemo Salenyi's husband is already out with their family's herd.
Vipi? Salama eh? Mambo. Haya, tunaweza enda sasa. Haya. Tanionyesha ni wapi?
She's been left behind with their 4 children, although it's about a month earlier than she had expected him to leave.
Anakaa tu na sisi alafu anaenda kuangalia mali ndio ahamishe mali nyingine kwa sababu nyasi inaanza kumalisika. Kwa sababu mali ni mingi huko ya watu wengi. Na anakaa hata kwa mali kwa sababu hata bii na japo mali nataka mwenyewe ndio iko ndani.
Unaweza nieleza kuhusu misimu ambazo zilizopita vile nyasi ilikuwa kufikia sasa?
Ile iliyopita nyasi imemalisika mpaka mbuzi hata inamalisika. Mbuzi tu inaenda inakataa kuenda inalala hapo. Inaenda inakataa kuenda inalala hapo. Mpaka basi tu Mungu anaona hiyo tabia yake ananyesha. Anakuta basi lakini amekuta wakati mamalisika.
Unaona kama huenda msimu itakuwa kama hiyo?
Itakuwa hii vile naona itakuwa kama hiyo.
Lautiriman's fellow Morans have been driving their cattle deep into Samburu County along the Owasongiro. Back in Nairobi, hydrologist Dr. Sean Avery, who's been studying Kenya's water systems since 1979, told me why they'd be going in this direction.
This is a picture of the basin, which you're familiar with, showing the Lorien Swamp. And this is a magnet because when you look at the basin there and you see where the water goes, in the dry periods, traditionally, the Samburu have always moved into areas where there's pasture. These areas here collect water from the Matthews Range, from the Ndotos, from the Milgaslugga, from the Wasangiro as well, but a lot of it comes in from these other areas. So that basin there is a basin which all these pastoralists know about. They come down from the north, they come from all directions to exploit those resources.
Around here.
The Owasongiro feeds into a large catchment area north of Isiolo called the Lorien Swamp. For hundreds of years, this area has been a grass bank for the Samburu, the Borana, the Somali and the Turkana communities, and the Owasongiro feeds this grass bank. But at this time, a lot less water from the Owasongiro is feeding into it.
Actually, if you look at Owasongiro River, the volumes of the Owasongiro River over the years has been actually going down or going low. This is because of one, there has been poor what we call, say, drainage in terms of feed, because this Wasanyiro River depends on the other feeder rivers.
Yeah.
But if it does not go there, it means actually death.
It takes us nearly a day's driving to get to Lotiriman's friends. For any herder, this would be a sight for sore eyes. Healthy herds in their hundreds. Driven by tens of young herders, some of whom are well armed. Just a few meters away, though, is evidence that the river is drying up faster than usual. It's still early in the dry season, but these young herders will be pushing up further north to areas where other communities are grazing.
Tukienda sehemu sisi huku tunang'ang'ana na borana sangine maji hapo mpaka Kom mpaka Serel Barua na kwa tunang'ang'ania na maji pande hiyo na wajamii kutoka area Borana.
Up north where they're headed, the Borana and the Samburu have fought before, and it's been deadly. In 2015 alone, 310 people were killed in intertribal clashes in northern Kenya. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, Samburu, where I met Lotiriman, and Isiolo are 2 of the 5 hotspots. Most of the men here are well armed, but are unsure about who we are and keep their guns well hidden. But when we settle down in the evening, there's no sign of tension about our presence there. Dinner is prepared in a flash, and we all get to eat after the head of the group of these Morans, Juma Leshekwet, gets his share. Even if we paid for the goat. At dawn, everyone is up and ready to go again.
Here in one of the many kraals of the Samburu, the cows are fat and very healthy, and I suspect the kraals of many other communities here along these plains will be the same. It's been a good rainy season and they've been all able to restock. But we're coming to the end of the good times here. And with the end of the good times, grass starts to thin, water becomes in short supply, and competition for those resources becomes even more tense. And with that tension becomes violence that often many people can't resolve and die from.
These Morans will graze their herds here a little longer before pushing up northwards towards Borana territory. Juma, the Moran's leader, knows that diplomacy will be very important as they go forward.
Tukubaliana tunaenda kwa kwanza baada ng'ombe hajaenda hapo wajamaa tunaenda kwa hii bor mpaka tunaenda hapo tunaomba hapo.
Kuna ni kama kuna uhasama kati yenu na Borana, kuna shida gani?
Sisi na Borana tunapigana tu kama tunashinda sahi kama mwaka moja, mwaka ingine ya pili tunapigana hivyo tu.
Ni kwa nini juu ya malisho ama ni?
Juu tu ya malisho.
Seasons are changing here. Tough times are ahead. But is that all that's changing?
If one looks at the population statistics for Kenya, one of the things that is very striking is that the population growth rates in the drylands is much higher than anywhere than the national average in the country. So although these areas are resource strapped, they have a finite limited resource by virtue of the fact that they are drylands. The irony is they've been put under much more disproportionate pressure by virtue of very significant increases in human population.
According to the last census, the populations in West Pokot, Turkana, Samburu and Isiolo are growing at 5%, almost double the national average. With bigger families, more and different kinds of livestock are needed, and water is getting harder to come by. I leave Juma Leshekwet and his boys walking into an uncertain few months ahead as they wait for a rainy season that forecasters have said will be delayed. I come back in late October when the rain is supposed to start falling. This time we head into Borana territory. We start at a shallow well in Kina. There's nothing shallow about it anymore. With the rains delaying, people have to go deeper and deeper to get water.
Na hii inaitwaje? Hii jina yake.
Jina yake? Dalaj. Dalaj.
So kama kiangazi itaendelea na mtapata mvua, unatarajia kama mvua?
Itakwenda. Mingi. Itakwenda.
Haj Goresi's cattle are getting thinner, but he's holding out hope that the rains will fall soon. We're deep into October at this time, 2 weeks past the estimated period when the rains were supposed to fall. It's the turn of his cattle and goats to drink at the trough. With so many people here hoping to keep their animals alive, everyone has to respect order. And it's order that Haj hopes will keep communities from fighting. A respected elder here in Kina, he's been part of the team that negotiated the Modogashe Declaration, an agreement between the communities living in Isiolo about where to graze.
Sasa hawa edha wamebanga hii ardhi wametenga pali tatu. Hii ardhi ya Kina wametenga pali tatu. Iko wakati ya mvua imetengwa bande na kuna hapa katikati imetengwa wakati ya jilali ya kawaida. Jilali ya kawaida. Najua saa hii ni jilali ya kawaida tu. Ya saa hii. Tukipata mvua ni jilali ya kawaida. Lakini tukikosa hii mvua ndio hatari. Sasa kuna wakati ya jilali kama hii tumebanga. Na tumebanga tena wakati ya ile jilali mbaya ile jilali mbaya kabisa hatari kabisa. Tumetenga bande hii ya karibu na Mero, mpaka yetu na Mero hapa katikati.
The declaration isn't holding very well. We're already hearing murmurs about some cattle that was stolen, and no one's taking any chances.
Na naona bado warani huwa wanalinda na
hii ni yangu. Hii ni halali. Hii tumepeleka kwa serikali. Hiyo sisi hatubigi na watu, hatunyang'anyi na watu. Hii ni ya kuchunga hii mali tu.
Lakini kama kuna amani kuna haja hii nini?
Najua amani. Tukisema amani sasa warani wa Kore, najua jana wamechukua ng'ombe ya Borana. Kore, Samburu. Wamechukua jana. Sasa hiyo ndio tunaogopa. Iko haja. Iko haja.
Haj had to drive his cattle 17 kilometers just to get here. And as I go deeper into Borana territory, I see clearly just how desperate the search is getting.
If ever there was a symbol of how badly this region needs water, then this is it. This is or was the Grisa Dam, a water pan that would gather the people of Isiolo County towards it. So promising it was that when they'd come here to quench their thirst all those 10 years ago when the government built this dam, the government also set up a chief's office here. Settlements started to come up. It looked as if this region would finally turn around its fortunes with regard to the lack of water. But years and years of drought had made sure that where I'm standing now, where water would reach about my waist, would eventually shrink and shrink further from the edges of this dam and finally go into the ground. And all that's left are cracks.
The fault lines in intertribal relationships here are getting deeper as well. Hussein below would know. He's the head of the Kenya Police Reservists in the area and has just come back from resolving a rustling dispute between the Borana and the Samburu.
So sasa hii ng'ombe, mara ya kwanza ni ng'ombe ya Samburu ndio ilipotea. Alhamisi wiki iliyopita. Ng'ombe 10 na punda 3. Hizi punda ambazo sasa hizi mliziona. Lakini ng'ombe tayari tumesha hesabu hapa ng'ombe 8 lakini hatujajaza hesabu, tunataka kupeana kesho yote.
This shouldn't be taken as a small victory. It's progress. Considering that all the communities here are very well armed, the reaction to this theft could have gone very differently.
Mimi nimepigwa risasi mara 3. 3 times. Hata saa nyingine iko kwa mwili yangu. Nimekoma ndani. Na hata sijapata usaidizi wa kutolewa na inahitaji operation. Hata ningeomba kwa mimi maoni yangu bunduki yote yalalishwe. Kwa sababu ikihalalishwa tutajua ni nani ndio ameiba na bunduki. Na tukijua ni wewe tuko na jina yako na tunajua bunduki yako, hata uwezi enda kubadilisha ulete nyingine mbaya. Kwa sababu namba serial number imeandikwa, kila kitu imeandikwa, tutakukamata. Na inakuwa rahisi kucontrol.
Hussein is often at the front lines of clashes between communities, trying to separate them when things get violent. He points us in the direction of a place where mediation came too late.
She had no livestock, no goat, no cow, no camel. She had nowhere to go.
Na hiyo pena hawezi toka kwa hati yangu mpaka nikufe.
Kulamawe, Siricho, and up to Basa. It was so painful. And it had...
Salesa Forole invites me into his home just as dusk settles in. He lives in Gafarsa, a small oasis village on the border between Isiolo and Garissa County. It's an attractive place for the communities around it because it has grass and water. A few weeks ago, that blessing became Salesa's family's curse. Herders said to be from the Somali community came marauding one night. Salesa's 82-year-old mother and his 11-year-old nephew were the first ones they found in their path.
Now, while they are men of my age, men who are younger than me, who can be part of the conflict, are there, they killed a mother of 82.
Your mother?
My own mother. They tied her this way, and they shot from point blank, from the left side to the right side. There was no confrontation. My mother, as per today, I've got only three young men. She has never had a boy. None of us, and they can bear witness, they know us all, none of us have never went. We are friends with them all. They communicate to us and they tell us who did what. Then the question is, why did they kill our mother? Then came our young boy, standard 1. 11 years. A child of 11 years. You tie at such a painful death. This is recurrent now. They want this war not to end. This conflict to go on.
Salesa's pain brings back memories from his childhood, another period of drought.
There was that time, the Shifter War. My mother gave birth to me that time. I can recall I suckled my mother because she had no livestock for 3.5 years. For 3.5 years. And it's terminated by somebody. God forbid. Until I felt other age-mates of mine don't suckle their mothers. I had to leave her. By then, I was in Duxi, I was reading Quran. I was as small as I was going to Duxit. She had to come, I circle, go, until the other boys were laughing at me. And then somebody who lives across, just across the town, just forget it.
I'm sorry. I'm very sorry to hear that.
Don't mind, it's life. It's life. She had no livestock, no goat, no cow, no camel. She had nowhere to go. She has no other way. She has to say she better perish, and then I should leave. And then somebody comes and terminates her life and then expects to live in a comfort life. No way. I tell you, no way. And I can tell anybody, no way.
He is sure that his mother's killers wanted to start a war between the two communities, with the land Salesa's community sits on as the prize.
The strong one will be staying, and the weaker one will perish.
Do you think that your community is ready to give up this land?
I don't think. If only my daughter is as small as she is. If only I have that daughter, I cannot leave this place. I will fight. I will fight with a panga, with a spear, with my own teeth. No day I will leave here. And I have told my sons, who are 7, none should leave this place. They should better perish, because I got them from this soil, and I will have to fertilize this soil again.
Tulizika hapa.
At the edge of the village, I meet Salesa's younger brother, Rashid Abdi.
Nikabura kijanangu na nikabura mamangu.
Call to prayer sounds just as we approach his mother and his son's graves. I ask him whether he'd be willing to forgive the men who did this, and I get more than I bargained for in his answer.
Unaweza samehe hao wenye walifanya hicho kitendo?
Siwezi. Na hiyo pena hawezi toka kwa hati yangu mpaka nikufe. Kwa sababu kijana wangu ni mdogo, hajawahi fanya kitendo mbaya, ni kijana kidogo. Mama yangu hajawahi toka nje, ni mama mzee, almost 79 years old.
That Rashid says he knows the people who killed his son and his mother, and that little has happened to find them shocks me and stays with me. I leave him to grieve a while longer.
It's been a very confusing day for me, where on the one hand you hear reassuring stories about how communities can come together to resolve things. But then we just come from the homestead and the graves of 2 brothers who've lost a mother and a son, all in the space of one evening when another community attacked them. And it just shows you that the culture of ethnic domination, of violence, especially around the issues of land and of grazing pasture, are still very deeply ingrained in the communities here. Those deaths, I don't think, are going to go unpunished, at least from the point of view of that community. And that's what worries me.
From every direction, it looks like communities are under pressure and getting more aggressive. Something needs to happen to cool things down. Then, after weeks of waiting, something does happen. It rains. Back in Isiolo, on the second day of the rains, I pull Lord Manlel Kalkuli, the head of the Drought Management Authority, outside so that we can experience the first drops of rain in this region, late as they are.
Shouldn't we be happy? I mean, this is what, the second day that we've seen rain back here.
Yeah.
Shouldn't we be happy that this has now come?
Actually, I would say we should be happy, but again, we are supposed to see ourselves. This is the second day, but according to the predictions that we are facing, is that we are actually going to these short rains will be actually small.
Yeah.
It will be undistributed below normal. It means migration. It means school dropout. It means poor conflict.
I leave town hoping against hope that by the time that I come back, somehow the rains will have washed away any prospect of violence. We come back on the 18th of December 2016, almost a month later. From Isiolo town to the countryside, I am greeted by a beautiful lush green. Green shoots of grass have replaced the dust coat that the county was under less than 30 days before. Everything seems to be right again. But with forecasts being what they were before the rain fell, I go back to the drought management office to check with Lord Man.
What our worry is that even normally, the long rains, that is the March, April, May, are not very good rains. Normally we don't expect a lot in this region. What we normally expect a lot and people rely on it is the October, November rains. But definitely it means that the March, April, May rains will be even below normal. The levels of Wasanyiro currently is very low compared to what we could say the normal.
How many kilometers from where it's supposed to drain is it draining now?
Currently it's actually draining even over 80 kilometers before where it's supposed to actually, the Lorian swamps.
It's not good news. The rains were so badly needed here.
The last time we saw a situation like this was in 2009 and 2010, when we had the last worst drought. Because at this particular time, the short rains failed, and then the long rains failed. So we had a very bad situation, and it was also accelerated by conflicts.
Going back into the field, I have to remind myself that the lush colors I'm seeing could be gone very quickly. And everyone needs every drop of water they can get. My first stop is at the Grisa water pan. When I was here last, it was dry as a bone.
When we last came here at the height of the dry season, it would be hard to imagine that this Grisa dam would ever fill up with water. In fact, I was standing somewhere around over there where that stone has just splashed into the water. And now life is returning to this dam. There's donkeys coming to drink water here and people bringing their tanks to be able to fill them up and survive another day in this harsh climate. But one has to wonder whether indeed this really is the level that should be represented here at the dam. What I'm told by residents is that it should be somewhere around here after a rainy season. But a shorter rain season and longer drought spells have ensured that things aren't quite the same as they used to be 10 years ago.
Again, the further we move into Borana territory, the more the truth about the rains reveals itself. These herders have been walking for 50 kilometers. It's absolutely sweltering. The goats can smell the water we are carrying in our car, and soon we are surrounded. We move further. This time it's a family that we meet. They're also searching for pasture. It's getting desperate. The National Drought Management Agency says that this drought has put at least 60,000 people at risk of starvation just here in Isiolo. And aid agencies are trying to fill the gap. Here at Balambata, villagers are getting one additional ration of food in preparation for the drought to come. On my mind, though, is the conflicts that this pressure causes. I make it back to Gafarsa, where I met Salesa and Rashid. Rashid's mother and his 11-year-old son were murdered by pastoralists from another community. He's still bitter.
Ushafikiria kuwasamehe hao watu?
Hapana. Kuna siku na tarehe. Kwa sababu mamangu hajawahi kwenda mahali ingine kufanya kitendo mbaya. Kijana wangu ni kijana kidogo class 4. Anayata hiyo mafikira. Ni innocent tu, anatembea tu kwa shule yake tu. Weekends tu ameenda kwa mama huko. Siwezi wacha hata saa nikiona siwezi wacha.
But there is cause to worry. Since we last met, another village and a school here were attacked. Again, everyone here is sure that they are being targeted for the land that they are on. And from what I've seen, the violence seems to be working.
When you think of the words climate change, you often think about a rise in the temperatures. And if you were standing where I'm standing right now, you'd be right in assuming that that's the exact answer that encapsulates everything to do with the changing weather patterns that we're living through right now. What people often don't think about are emptied out villages such as this one in Belgesh, here in Isiolo County. People lived here once. These are where families cooked for one another. This is where neighbors borrowed salt from one another. And now nobody lives here because of conflict between communities. People often don't make the distinction between the conflicts on the ground and the changing weather patterns in which they live in and the environment in which they live. One would have to ask oneself, if this was caused by climate change, where are they now?
In Samburu County, shallow wells on the bed of the Owasongiro River are the only way that herders can get to water for their cattle. And guns are a lot more present here. The herders' shyness about their guns has melted away now. I get the sense that they feel vulnerable at this shallow well. They say that they need to be ready in case herders from other communities show up here as well. I meet up with the Morans who I had spent time with in late September 2016. They're headed for Kom, at the border between Samburu County and Isiolo County, a dangerous place to be sure. They're set up like a military unit, but the need for grass drives them now more than anything else. Juma Leshekwet, the head of these Morans, is away checking on his family and has left his younger brother Leharto in charge.
Hapa ndio shida ya nyasi tu, lakini mvua sijanyesha kwa hapa. Kitu ngine nyasi sijaingia hapa tu, lakini maji haiko hapa. Kitu ngine nyasi iko pande ile. Iko mbali. Lakini Borana iko na shida.
Kati yenu na Borana kuna shida sasa?
Iko na shida.
Shida nieleze ni shida gani, wanafanya nini?
Shida iko na hiyo Borana iko na nyasi, lakini sisi hayuko nyasi, lakini mnasema ng'ombe hatutaki kukula nyasi kwa wapi? Kwa huko. Lakini shida imepeleka sisi kwa wapi? Kwa hapa tu ya ng'ombe tu huko.
They're stressed about the grass, so they take our visit as a welcome break and let their guard down a little. We take one last photo together, capturing that moment in time before a very uncertain period in their lives.
We have the wet season grazing reserve, we have the dry season, and we have the drought grazing reserves. And you see now, currently, they are supposed to be in the wet grazing reserves, and people are now concentrating along the Wasonyiro River. And this means that they are going into reserve areas much more earlier than the normal times. Therefore, it means that concentration now, people will be moving towards Kom area, and even to the drought grazing reserves of Yamicha, Duma, and even areas like Boran. And this is now an area where we also, our neighboring counties pastoralists are also moving towards the area. Those areas, for example, in Com, the Marsabit pastoralists, people from Marsabit will be moving towards Com, Sambor will be moving towards Com, and then definitely we are seeing that there will be a likelihood of resource-based conflict.
The Leshekwets are headed north to Com, a town at the border between Isiolo and Samburu County. But some of their tribesmen are heading towards the Aberdare Ranges, where I started this story, and to the Laikipia Plains. I catch up with one group of men and boys driving their cows through Rumuruti into the Aberdares in the dead of the night.
These tens and hundreds of cattle being driven across the plains have been on a very long and desperate journey, looking for grass, looking for pasture, and they're being driven up towards the Aberdare Ranges and Mount Kenya. Now the fear is that if they get there, while there might be grass up in those ranges, the temperatures will be so low, too low for them to be able to survive, and they could die in their hundreds.
Pasture for their animals is their primary concern now, and they search day and night for it. The river that once quenched the thirst of animals in this region and the rains that renew the landscape may be back, but for these communities, those rains and that river may as well have come to an end. In the next part of my journey, I go to the plains of Laikipia. I see the cost of conflict firsthand. One driven by drought, a fight for land set up since the colonial days, and bitter politics of a coming election.
This government is targeting, it wants to finish us.
We're headed down to Majianyoka, and we're the first ones who, outside of the staff of the Laikipia Nature Conservancy, have been allowed to go anywhere close to the place that was burnt just a few days ago. And to be honest, I'm a little nervous because we don't know, given there's a lot of security here, but we don't know how close or how far the raiders are. And it's dusk right now.
Thank you.